The cat is out of the bag. Well, to what extent, in dealing with these sorts of issues, does having come from a Jewish background color the way you think?
Well, I think I didn't have my religious background was mostly cultural, not theological. I don't think the word God was ever mentioned in my household. I went to Sunday school, and there wasn't a whole lot of God talk there. It was there was a lot of arguing, and Jews are famous for being opinionated. There's the old expression, 10 Jews, 11 opinions. Right. And so that tradition, perhaps handed down from Talmudic disputation, was very much part of my Jewish education. Maybe it's part of my personality. I'm very happy to acknowledge the influence of Jewish culture on my own thinking and personality. But for me, it's a cultural endowment and gift. It's something that I have a great deal of affection for. I think in the way that, say, an Italian American would have great affection for everything Italian. It is certainly not theological, and nor is it. That is, I'm an atheist, so the advantage of being Jewish is that there's. It's kind of a don't ask, don't tell kind of religion, where as long as you do the right things, no one cares that much what you think. And of course, I don't do them either in terms of being religiously observant, but I do mind the cultural tradition for the humor, the language, the tradition of intellectual disputation. I also I used to think, and this was very much part of my background, that Judaism was the original source of morality in the Western tradition, that the Jews gave morality to the world in the form of the Torah and the Ten Commandments and so on. And I don't believe that anymore. I mean, I don't think there's anything, I don't think the Jews have been immoral, but I think that the source of morality goes back to the Greeks and was really developed in the Enlightenment, and that the Bible is a pretty rotten guide to how we should treat each other.
Again, 6 directions to go there, but because you've actually written about this, there's an additional point I want to raise here, which is that you've written about why is there such a preponderance of intellectual brilliance in such a small community, and how could that possibly have arisen? And you've written on this. Would you like to sort of scout the argument a little bit for me?
Yes. Well, I was writing, explaining a proposal by a geneticist and an anthropologist, Henry Harpending and Gregory Cochrane, where they argued that it's not Jewish mothers, it's Jewish genes, and a very controversial hypothesis that selection for the middleman niche in medieval and early modern Europe, that is, merchants, retailers, moneylenders, involved Darwinian natural selection on genes that enhanced abstract intellectual reasoning, that it's more intellectually demanding to be a moneylender or a merchant than it is to be a farmer or a soldier or a craftsperson. And that as a result, there was a millennium or so of selection, and the outsized representation of Ashkenazi Jews in intellectually demanding professions and pastimes, like chess, is a product of that. I didn't endorse that hypothesis. I don't know if it's true. I think we don't have enough evidence to believe it. But what I did do is try to explain it, including the empirical tests that would show whether it's true or false, which Cochrane and Harpending explained themselves. They also argued that the genetic disease load in Ashkenazi Jews, something that's long been documented, the fact that Jews are more susceptible to a variety of genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs, is a byproduct of selection of genes for rapid brain development. And that's what makes the hypothesis testable. And the test is actually quite straightforward. If you were to look at the intelligence of carriers of a single copy of recessive disease-causing genes characteristic of the Ashkenazim, they should be smarter. And that if anyone wanted to do the experiment, that would test it.
Henry Harpending, implicit in what you were just saying, and also in other papers that Henry published last year, is that human evolution is still going on, and at a fairly amazing clip, according to him. If that's the case, I have to ask you about this, because from evolutionary psychology position and so on, the idea is that there is a human nature, and that we in fact basically have inherited a great number of adaptations which were useful to us in our days as hunter-gatherers. We still have them, and so on and so forth. Does that jibe with Henry's notion of things changing so rapidly, selective pressures producing so many differences? Wouldn't there be cognitive differences happening now? Wouldn't all our hunter-gatherer instincts have gone away and so on? Wouldn't we have a new set of instincts? Wouldn't we be remaking ourselves as we go along?
That's quite possible. I mean, in a sense, it would be, on the one hand, it would complicate one of the kind of simplifying assumptions of evolutionary psychology, which is that so much more of human evolution took place in the hunter-gatherer stage than in the agricultural or industrial stages, that most of human nature would be weighted to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So that has to be modified depending on what the evidence looks like in terms of what proportion of our genes have been targets of recent selection, and of course what those genes do. They may just be disease resistance genes. On the other hand, in a way, if he's right, and if there has been a lot of recent selection, and if it turns out that those genes involve cognition and emotion, it would kind of be evolutionary psychology on steroids, in the sense that it wouldn't just be that we're adapted to that particular environment, but that we may have adaptations to much more recent features of our ecology. So I think that certainly will require changes in this simplifying assumption of evolutionary psychology, but it's too early to tell what they'll be.
So one of the other pieces that bears on this is another Brockman thing. What is your dangerous idea? And your dangerous idea was groups of people may differ genetically in their average talents and temperaments. Is this essentially what we've been, to some extent, what we've been talking about here?
Well, it's related to that, in the sense that if all human evolution stopped before the ancestral populations split off and went to their different continents, then it would be almost impossible for there to be innate differences between groups. If evolution has continued since after that split, then at least it's possible. Now, it doesn't mean that it happened, and if it did happen, it doesn't mean that it happened in different ways in the different branches. It could be that whatever selection has taken place recently has happened in every branch of the human lineage. So one doesn't imply the other, but it does open the door to it.
And you also said at the beginning here, because you wrote the introduction to this, and I thought it was rather nice, it was a piece about the importance of science in boldly facing and coming up with these dangerous ideas, and that the science has this immensely important role to play. This goes back to the point I raised earlier about your being a kind of a statesman of science at this point. How do you see, given the fact that we have an election coming up not too far away, what do you see the role of science in future administrations? Do you think that there's enough emphasis on science? Do you think it's been given short shrift?
I think it has been given short shrift. I'm one of the advocates of Science Debate 08. We
will have some of those people coming to Beyond Belief, so...
Very good, yes. The idea that the presidential candidates should have one debate on science and technology. I think I was originally skeptical of the idea that there was a Republican war on science, to quote from Chris Mooney's book. But I think there's a lot, unfortunately, there's been a lot to that there's been a suppression and a hostility of science in the last 8 years, and which I dearly hope will be reversed. For one thing, We have to have a grip on reality. If climate change is happening, we better do something about it. We have to know what the facts are. I think there's enormous potential for mitigation of human misery in biomedical research. If we've got a bioethics council that's trying to